Hello, and welcome to Spooky Encounter, the positively frightening 107th episode of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' retro gaming-centric podcast. I'm Robert Fenny Kruger, and joining me today are Countess Alana Hagues.
Oh wow, there you go. I was never going to get as good as that, so I'm proud.
And Dom Kim was actually the name of the scientist who created the monster. The monster's name was Dom Kim's monster.
Yes, hello.
So here we are, folks. It's Halloween time, and I thought we'd do something of a free-form discussion on horror RPGs as well as frightening monsters and haunting moments in games that aren't necessarily horror. It's not the easiest thing to find a horror RPG these days. They're quite few and far between, so I thought it could be fun to talk about on top of what horror games we can bring. Also, moments in games that might not intentionally be frightening, but just are for some reason, whether that's from a childhood memory or just something that an event or a character in a game that just doesn't sit well with you for some reason. Alana, I know you're a big Shadow Hearts fan, and I think that's kind of like the premier horror RPG franchise that sadly isn't running anymore.
Yeah, it's probably the most recent example I can think of. And even then it's carried from the kind of decade of where they were fairly big, I would say. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we probably touched on it. We did a Shadow Hearts Covenant double at the beginning of the year, and I think we probably touched on something that I'm really fond of, and that's the enemy designs in this game, particularly in the first one. In the second one, they get a bit more goofy. I know one of our other regular podcasters, Hillary, is a big fan of Kudelka, and I'm not as au fait with some of the enemies and the lore in that game because I've not played it, but there are always a couple of particular ones that stand out for me in those in the first game in the series. So I mean, the one that we've probably both talked about this, but there is a really famous one. I think they're in this village. So there's a village in China. I can't remember the specific details, but they've all been eaten by cats, or they're all cat demons now, and it's pretty great. It's the way Yuri addresses it is, it's just like, oh, this is what it's like now, it's fine, and he just walks through, and there's all these horrible. The cat village in Shadow Hearts is kind of the first moment where you're just like, this is a little bit different. I mean, there's obviously something very Lovecraftian about it anyway from the start, and you get that. But one enemy that I want to talk about is an enemy called the Postman, and I think we've had some fun discussions about this one. And so Shadow Hearts enemies tend to be quite gross anyway, but this one's particularly fun. So obviously it plays on the pun of the dogs don't like postmans and things like that. So the enemy is basically a dog, but instead of its head, I think it's got another arm, which is a postman's arm, and it stands on that hand, and it kind of just hops around. It's not particularly not particularly bizarre in the context of Shadow Hearts, because you have some strange things in that game, but it's pretty wonderful to look at. I'm a big fan of the Postman. It just makes me think of all the things that make the first game really good, because what the first game has that Covenant doesn't is it has this atmosphere that just makes you feel really uneasy. Covenant is very goofy, but 1 has got this very, not macabre tone, but it's very much, it's very creepy.
It's quite phantasmagorical, I'd say.
Yeah, that's a good word to put it, I think. But there are Hellcats as well in the Cat Village, which I think they've got flesh hanging off of their arms. There's just some really weird enemy designs. In the second one, the weirdest ones I can think of are the toy dogs. Although there is a zombie dog, which we like to talk fondly about in the Blanca side quest.
Yeah.
He was quite cute. He was quite funky. Those side quests are wonderful. Yeah, I think Shadow Hearts is good because it doesn't really ever, the first one in particular, it doesn't really ever step into it being jump scares overly scary, and it's just enough to make you think that there is something really bizarre going on. I mean, you've got basically a false god. The final boss is kind of nightmare fuel. He's wonderful. But yeah, the atmosphere of those games, especially the music, is really fantastic. And I think that if you want to go and play a RPG, those are ones that you should definitely check out. 1 more than 2 and 3. 3 is not scary at all, creepy at all. Unless you count drunk cats as creepy, in which case then this is the game for you.
What I liked so much about Shadow Hearts is just how a lot of, like, the bestiary in particular, the descriptions of these creatures, they all sounded like they were really drawing from curses, and like their origins are all suitably creepy. I mean, you know, we've talked at length about the mailman now, but I remembered in particular the frog god with the hand-shaped tongue, and it's I've looked up its description. It was make 1,000 frog mutants devour each other, and the last one remaining becomes a frog god. It's like, you know, just thinking about these awful arcane rituals that are just happening nonstop in this world. But the one that's always stuck with me over many years since I first played the first Shadow Hearts was some of the Yamaraja bosses. In particular, the Wind boss. I think it's I think it's like a young maiden who has a tragic story in this seaside village, and then she ends up transforming into like this 20-foot tall spindly thing with like a bonnet and a tentacle face.
Yes, I do remember this one. Oh, yeah. It's
Weird.
an Earth one, I believe. Oh, it says Yamatara Wind, and then it says it's an Earth boss. I was like, oh, yeah, I remember being very confused by that. Yeah, these bosses were really horrible, weren't they?
They were so cool.
Really, really do. They're really cool. They draw on so much lore, which is really nice. There's always a backstory to them. It's always like you gave that one for the woman, and there's always really strange, bizarre findings. It's not like they're just, oh no, it's because there's bad air or there's bad mana and monsters have now come out. It's like, no, it's fine. They're possessed or they're dead and they've been brought back to life or things have happened. They are very, very cool, these bosses.
I think that's so much fun because, you know, as you said, they don't just go on it's evil energy. They dive into it a little bit, but, you know, they add just enough flavor there that it's still mysterious and obscure, but there's just a little bit more there to get you thinking about exactly what this means, you know? Yeah,
it's really clever. Another one that just came to mind was the echidna, which is it's just a snake, and it's not Knuckles. No, definitely not. But it's a snake that swallowed a pregnant woman, and it's become a like half fetus, half snake. And it's writhing around and screaming. It's beautiful.
That's the one with the description that it's just in pain all the time, right? Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. I had another one in my head, and I cannot remember it, because there are so many good ones in this game. No, not the Kappa. It'll probably come to me, but there's too many good enemy designs in this game that are fantastic.
Yeah, there definitely are, folks. I mean, if you haven't played Shadow Hearts, and I know it might be a little bit difficult to find nowadays, have a little search through its bestiary. Most of the images are online. Dom, you've been rather quiet. Hit us with what you got.
Well, I was planning on talking about Dark Souls.
Yeah.
For the franchise as a whole.
Good.
I mean, Dark Souls, I think, also borrows quite a lot of elements from, like, well, Shadow Hearts, but also more like traditional, or like, maybe not folklore, but it, I think its enemy designs are also pretty, are creepy at times. And, like, I think one of the great things about Dark Souls as well is that it does, like, it has jump scares, but I think some of the scariest moments are, like, it's like, you can see your, like, impending doom coming upon you, because you know you're not ready to handle this enemy. Yeah, for instance, like in Tomb of the Giants, which is one of the last areas in Dark Souls, you come across, like, the area is infested with skeletons, and at first, like, you get scared kind of easily because, like, it's like big giant skeleton dudes with glowing eyes. Once you think you've adjusted to that enough, like, the real kicker is, like, there's a completely dark area, and they give you a lantern beforehand. So just as you lift your lantern up to look through it, there's this, like, giant four-legged, like, skeleton dog hybrid, and the first thing it does is pounce upon you. And that was, like, such a scary moment in the game. And, like, that, like, the enemy as well was also just, like, an absolute nightmare to fight against, because, like, its movements were erratic, and it would just, like, spin through the air at you and stuff. and it was just that was actually just straight up nightmare fuel.
If I remember correctly, like there's multiple ones of those, and while you've got the lantern in one hand, so your shield arm is disabled, and like you're trying to like roll around them, but if there's bottomless pits all over that place as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That place was a delight.
Yeah, you have a lot that's vying for your attention in a very frightening situation.
Yeah, and like there are like, of course, it doesn't help that there are like archers that are just like firing at you from who knows where. Because like one moment, like an arrow just flies in from the right, and like another moment, another one flies in from the left, and you have no idea where they're firing from. That place was not very pleasant.
Yeah,
to say the least.
that was one of my least favorite parts of that journey, I gotta say.
But I also feel like what do you call it? Like the entire stretch, like in the early part of the game, from the Undead Burg all the way up to Blighttown, I thought that part was just like a genuinely well-made, super unnerving, like 3-hour stretch of the game.
Oh yeah,
because it's like you're descending and like things are getting like noticeably more decrepit. Like a lot of the enemies also, because the depths is basically like it's a sewer system. A lot of the enemies also sort of just like they look really bloated, and you have like giant rats and slimes that you have to fight along the way. And then like it finishes off with like a fairly easy boss, but it's still like super scary nonetheless with the gaping dragon.
I had a tough time with the gaping dragon.
Yeah. Whose entire body is just teeth. It's just a giant mouth.
I love his design. It's so amazing.
Well, I love his intro when it just looks like a little snake is peeking up and then rises up and it's just the tip of his nose.
Yeah.
He's bigger than I thought. Yeah.
And like I think its lore is also super interesting in that it was like a dragon that was trapped underneath, and because of its hunger, it like transformed into this teeth monster to try and devour whatever it could find. I thought that was like a pretty cool way to lead into Blighttown, which is just another horror show in and of itself.
I actually liked Blighttown. I mean, the frame rate.
You're the first person I know to say that.
The frame rate goes nuts there, but I think like a lot of the mood and the lore around it did it for me. And just thinking about how these creatures have built like their own little settlement in sewage and have just become poison creatures and are just living in this like muck and nastiness. But what really does it for me in the Souls games, and I'm happy that like all of them do this. It's just the disquieting nature of the NPCs. Like you'll just about everybody you'll meet, they'll thank you for rescuing them, and then they'll give like a sinister laugh.
Yeah.
And what's the name of that guy? I know it's Yurt in Demon Souls, but Dark Souls it's the guy who kills the Firekeeper, and you have to go after him. Lautrec, is that his name?
Yeah, Knight Lautrec.
Yeah,
the one in the gold armor.
That's right. Yeah, Knight Lautrec. He's a sinister character. You rescue these characters from behind prison doors, and you're immediately questioning if you've made the right decision. And in some cases, you haven't. And I really respect how that series keeps you on your toes with that, playing with the idea of who is safe, and doing a good deed is just opening a bigger can of worms.
But it's a shame that like the later Dark Souls don't really do that. I mean, I think it was like most prominent in Dark Souls 1, where the NPCs like moved around and they did their own thing, because like it felt a lot like it wasn't the world revolving around you, like you were just part of the bigger picture. But in the later Dark Souls, that is kind of lost, and like a lot of NPCs just like sit around at the main base.
I mean, there's some of that in Dark Souls 3, but I think the problem with that game is it's so arcane to raise some of these quest flags that it's very easy to just end a storyline without knowing why that's happened or what you've done wrong. And I think Dark Souls 1 excels at just having that dynamism that you mentioned. It doesn't feel like
exactly.
Bloodborne's all right about it too. But yeah, I think few games do it as well. No games do it as well as the first Dark Souls. That's for sure. And just one of the first NPCs you meet is hiding something quite sinister. The fellow,
the Crestfallen Knight.
Not the Crestfallen Knight. The cleric who's selling miracles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's a special boy. I guess we'll move on ahead to haunting moments in RPGs that aren't necessarily horror games, or I guess this can kind of be conflated with games that are unintentionally horrifying for some reason. Alana, do you have any examples of this before I rattle on?
Ooh, I know you'll have loads. I trust you. But I do have a couple. I want to stick with one. And this is more to do with the music in the game. When we had this topic idea going, and I'm recently, with my SNES Mini, I'm replaying Secret of Mana with my other half. And
oh, cool.
There are the tombs or the temples. There's two of them. And the one in Old Town and the one off of Pandora and the other one off of the Royal City, the Empire. That's right. And both of these dungeons have extremely creepy, cool music. And when I was really little, I was about 8 or 9 maybe when I played this music used to give me the chills. It's just 8 bits of bell or 16-bit music, bells and chimes. And the dungeons themselves aren't particularly creepy, but they definitely have this vibe of, they're full of zombies. They're full of these like little. I tell you what is horrifying about the second one in particular: those damn bubble enemies that you have to use magic on, and they just jump all the time. And it's like, please stop. But I really like the atmosphere. It's kind of the Secret of Mana's not necessarily got the most fantastic atmosphere because it's just cutesy kids running around killing rabbits and stuff. But these dungeons in particular are really good at making you feel really uncomfortable. And I think the penultimate boss in the game as well, which is the Lich, has some really, really creepy music as well. I mean, he is just a half-suspended skeleton with lots of robes over him. But those moments in Secret of Mana have always stuck out for me because they are so different from the rest of the bright and colourful game, that you've got these really misty dungeons that are a bit of a pain to get through. They're some of the longer ones in the game as well. And they just have this really foreboding music that's rhythmic and almost, I don't know, it's almost like someone's chanting a curse at you or something. It's just really great, and they just used to really freak me out when I was little. I mean, they're fine now, but they're still got this really nice, cool atmosphere that I've always kind of longed for in 8-bit RPGs, 16-bit RPGs, because they're not always that creepy. And props to Kikuta for doing such a great soundtrack and such a good job at that one.
I know the bit that you mean. That used to creep me out a lot as a kid as well. That's sort of the Balinese-inspired minimal music with the synth gamelan. And I used to spend a lot of time in those areas just because it was completely unlike the rest of that game. I mean, the Witch's Forest is still pretty dark, but it's got that light music. But then this is just like, it feels like it's from a different game. And
yeah, it does.
If I remember correctly, I think one of them is like the base of a cult, and there's like all these people wearing masks who just won't speak. And I think
so. It's Pandora. The first time you go there, you can't get in there because they're guarded by these people with masks, and they don't talk because Pandora is gradually all the people are being possessed and drawn into this cult by Thanatos. Yeah. If anyone's called Thanatos, don't ever trust them. Yeah, those rooms are really creepy. But now, like, when I went back recently, it just made me laugh because there are these really bizarre enemies. I can't remember what they're called, but they're like tomato towers.
Yes.
It's just a tomato head on like a little floating platform. And they just keep summoning these zombies. And I'm just like, why was I scared? This is silly. But, yeah, you hit the nail on the head, really.
The atmosphere does a lot for it.
Definitely. Definitely does. I've got some more, but I'll wait. We can...
Okay, yeah, we can trade off. How about you, Dom?
Well, one of the moments that kind of stood out to me was really sort of bizarrely scary was in Stardew Valley.
Ooh,
When
really?
you first, yeah, when you,
Ooh.
well, like it was really unexpected because like you've been having a really jolly good time like farming and fishing and getting to know the villagers, and then you head to the mines, and the first time you reach some of those like really like level like 70 plus levels in the mines, like it's pitch black. You have no idea, like it's a brand new floor. You have no idea what's going on, and all of a sudden you hear these like new enemies that you've never like new sound effects for new enemies, and you have no idea where they're coming from, and then like all of a sudden you're just dying. So it's like it's like really sort of like it was like very strange, and then like actually dying in the game just like involves you going back to the hospital, but still it was like really unnerving. I can remember this like first time I died. I don't think I went into the mines for another like week of in-game time. So
Amazing.
I remember being pretty surprised by that. Like, you get quite far down, and like the music gets more sparse, but it's still quite upbeat. And then,
yeah,
a floor will get completely covered in mist, and the music will stop, and then you get a message saying, "Oh, all the monsters are coming," and then like all these flying insects come at you just endlessly until the mist goes away, and that sound really does something to me, especially when we're wearing headphones. I've got a thing about bees because I got stung in the eyeball when I was 5.
Oh, that's understandable. Yeah, me too.
That's
But not I.
That's a phobia that I've gotten a little bit better about, but only in very recent years. It's still enough to
understandable.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh.
it sets something primal in me.
Yeah. I mean, if you've ever played Final Fantasy XIV online, you'll know the bees are a bad thing because there are some bees in a particular dungeon that kill you in one hit.
Oh
And
god.
it's like, no. And they come out and everyone panics and they're like, no, kill the bees. And you probably get shouted at, but it's like, I didn't know they killed you in one hit. So, yeah, I avoid the bees at all costs in anything.
The insects also like buzz really loudly, and I'm also like terrible at like with creepy crawlies and stuff and insects. So like that was also very unnerving to go through. Especially when the game spawns like 3 or 4 of them at once.
Yeah.
And it's like
Oh, good.
buzzing everywhere.
They're tough to keep track of because they fly through the walls and just dive bomb you, and it's not the best combat engine, but I mean it's not designed for that.
It's passable.
Yeah, no, I had fun diving into the mines. I haven't gotten to the bottom yet, but I think I'm in the 90s. And Alana, you reminded me of an embarrassing story. This isn't even a horror story. This is just my own personal horror of playing Ragnarok Online like 15 years ago, late at night, and fighting a bunch of bee enemies in a field of flowers, and then a bee flew in through the window and landed on a flower on the screen, and I just like ran out of the room screaming.
So good. I would do the same.
I came back in like every couple hours, and it was still there, just like trying to pollinate the screen. And
Yeah, I've had bees land on me whenever I'm wearing something particularly floral, but
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, bees are not good.
one thing that I used to find really creepy as a kid was the corridors in the first Phantasy Star. It had these first-person dungeons that. They were all like every wall and every corridor was identical due to the technological restraints at the time, but the scrolling was really smooth for the era, and it's even smoother than some Super Nintendo games that did first-person dungeons later. So I found them quite immersive, and you had to draw a map on paper yourself in those days. So like it was really easy to get lost in one if you just didn't have the patience to draw a map like I didn't at a very, very young age. So I'd get trapped, and then I'd think about what it would be like to be trapped in one of these endless identical corridors, like a disquieting shade of blue, and the random encounters would jump up out of nowhere, or you'd find a chest, and most likely it would be trapped and it would explode and take out most of your team. And in retrospect, that just sounds frustrating, but I just being in a dungeon that's just the same, except for a left turn here and a right turn here. it used to freak me out when I played that game for long stretches of time. The final dungeon in particular had this really gloomy music, and you weren't fully in it until you dropped down a whole bunch of pits, which functioned as a point of no return before the final boss. But it's like, wow, well, you're not getting out of there. It was simplistic but effective messaging of a point of no return that I hadn't really seen any other game at the time do.
Narrow corridors. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I was going to just add to it and just say that, like, narrow corridors are something that just creeps me out in general. Like, watching people play those first-person RPGs always makes me feel really uneasy, because maybe that's why I can't play Resident Evil 7, because the corridors in that basement are just so narrow that I will turn around and there'll be something there and I'm just going to freak out. And so it's just the association. Yeah, the association that I have with those narrow corridors and turning the corner and there being an enemy. I struggle with those just because they creep me out. They make me feel really nervous all the time.
Yeah, they used to freak me out a lot as a kid. Eye of the Beholder had a similar kind of thing where enemies would just they were a little bit less random in Eye of the Beholder. I think they would follow you around, so it was quite difficult to escape from an encounter once it had targeted on you. And like being in these one square wide hallways with a monster and unable to get around, I sympathize. I really do. But I also like use of mechanics to drive home a point. And what I'm thinking here is many RPGs include the unwinnable boss fight as a plot point, but a few of them you can die to, and you have to select to run away on your own. I really like that kind of thing, because you're actually turning tail and running against these unbeatable odds, like the living forest in Phantasy Star 4. I was thinking about that, where you have to get this plot item to burn down these living trees, but you can just get into this battle and just like fight these trees where another one grows in its place every time you cut one down. And that's got a big old quest to get that torch to burn that forest down. And on the other side of the forest is like this like biological tower of like guts and bone. It's just awful.
Beautiful.
But there's the rat cave sacrifice in Romancing Saga 3 as well, where it's a relatively normal village, except they're sacrificing townspeople every so often to this monster in this cave, and I think you masquerade as a sacrifice to get in there, and you find that everybody's being sacrificed to like this giant horde of rats that you have to escape from. And like, it's not even, the boss music doesn't even play. It's just like the music cuts out, and it's just like this ambient sound of like thousands of squeaks all at once, which actually sounds kind of cute in retrospect. But
no.
But having to escape from that rat cave, that's one of my favorite bits of that game. But we can come back to me.
I hate those kind of.
So obviously, because I'm on a podcast, I have like a legal obligation to speak about this game. Skies of Arcadia has a really creepy bit that always used to freak me out as a kid. So it's not very far into the game. So it's after Fenner gets captured, and you have to go to Valois, which is the town, the villain's stronghold, basically. So the city's split up into two. So there's the upper side, which is all lavish and gold, and all the aristocrats live there. But obviously you have to land in Lower Town, which is basically really dingy, dark, grim. Everyone's in poverty. There are kids like crawling around for bread and things like that. And so you have to go under the catacombs, which to save your pirate crew and to save Fenner, because they're going to get executed, and the bodies get thrown under the Colosseum, which goes to the catacombs. And so I think the dungeon music here again is particularly creepy. I think it's called Dungeon Ruins, so if it's not hugely atmospheric again, but this place just used to really gross me out. Some of the enemies were particularly gross, so there are like men, like zombies, that have got parasites or bugs on the back of them, and they're bent and hunched over backwards, and they spray acid at you and they can hug you and they poison you as well. But the particular culprit is a boss for this one, and I used to absolutely hate it. And I think if I remember rightly, it's called Bleegok, and it's right underneath the Colosseum where all these bodies get thrown. And so as you approach it, there is this like path of skulls and bones and everything, and you come up to this thing, and it's just like a giant gelatinous blob, but you can see straight through it, and you can see its guts, and you can see bones in its stomach, and it's got this really horrible face. And
I'm looking it up now. I remember this.
Yeah, so I think the description of it is something like monster that lives under the Colosseum. It like ate the corpses of the people who were executed, or something like that. But it just used to freak me out as when I was really little, and Valor always used to creep me out anyway, because the Valor town music is really horrible and it's just really dingy and nasty. But this boss in particular, I mean, it pukes on you. That was its special move. So it used to puke all over you and poison you. And I think I used to find it really difficult when I was little, but it was just a really nasty moment in an otherwise very nice game that I used to hate. Once you get past it, it's okay, and the rest of the game's really nice. I don't think there's anything else in particular that creeped me out about it, but yeah, Bleegok was just something that always stuck in my mind, and I always get a little bit wary as I go up to it, but now there's an easy way of doing it. So yeah, it was just more of a memory thing for me that Bleegok's always stuck in my head as like creepy, but just kind of there. But at least he's got a bit of a purpose. Like he's just evolved out of these dead corpses and just eats them. So happy pirating.
It looks very Sega. I mean, Skies of Arcadia is like one side of Sega, the bright green hill zone side, and then this is like the Alien Syndrome or Alien Storm side, and it's like they've come together in this to meet in the middle.
Yeah, there's nothing else like it in the game at all. Like, everything else is Green Hill Zone pretty much, and then this is just like, oh, here we go. This is what we do sometimes as well. But yeah, nice little touch. Zelda games, I mean, tend to be kind of creepy in a way. I mean, Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, which we also did on the podcast last year, are particularly frightening. And we spent a lot of time talking about just how unsettling Termina is in terms of, well, I mean, the moon has got to be one of the creepiest things ever, and the first time I ever saw it was in Smash Bros, and it just used to scare the hell out of me. But playing it on the 3DS and with the time limit, obviously it's not as strict as it on the N64 version, really just that game knew how to make me feel uncomfortable about everything that I did. It doesn't matter, like, every single townsfolk has a particular quirk. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of the man who sells the masks. He is the most bizarre NPC in that entire series.
He's really good.
He's really fantastic. But Ocarina of Time always gets a bit of a, like, I feel it's a little bit creepier because maybe the whole atmosphere is not as creepy as Majora's Mask, but there are some nasty moments, and there are the Temple Under the Well. I think it's the Temple of Darkness, probably is one of the nastiest places in probably Nintendo history. So in particular, I can't remember what the boss is called, but there's the boss in the prison which has all the hands that come out of the ground. Ooh. And it walks towards you and wobbles towards you, and it is nightmare stuff. Like, I could never watch my brother play Ocarina of Time when it first came out because it just used to scare the heebie-jeebies out of me. Especially the Deku Tree. The Deku Tree's got a really unsettling face, and it just used to creep me out all the time. But I mean, some of the bosses in that game are really cool as well. But the Temple of Darkness is a really nice place. Actually, the Forest Temple was the other one that used to freak me out, because you'd have the wall hands that would come from the ceiling and just grab you at any given moment. And the only way you'd know is by this noise. Like, you know, the cartoon noise where if something drops, like a piano drops from a cliff, that same noise they kind of make the same noise as that as they drop down. And then the next thing you know, Link is like, and then he's just like, you're put back to the beginning of the dungeon. It's like, what was that? Like, yeah. So the All Masters, or whatever they're called, they were really horrible. But Zelda does a really nice job of doing slightly creepy moments. I haven't come across anything in Breath of the Wild yet, but I'm sure. I mean, the constant fear of getting lost all the time, if that counts. But, you know, Zelda's good at doing things like that.
Isn't that kind of the point of Breath of the Wild? Just to, like, set you free into the world wherever you want?
Pretty much. Yeah.
They're more comical than they are scary, but I do find the presence of the Yiga clan to be quite disquieting. Like, if you're just riding your horse out in the fields, and there's like just a lady asking you to stop, and she's basically just saying nonsense to you, and it just ends with her transforming into a ninja and attacking.
Yeah.
And when that happens more and more, and the camera will zoom in on the person's face as their eyes change and they're about to attack. It's a good moment, but
that is good.
Yeah, I think Breath of the Wild is one of the more. It seems like it's more light in tone than some of the more recent entries. But
yeah,
I also think that works in its favor.
It does. I think the only things that have really unsettled me are the shrine. When you do a shrine, there is this like dead. I don't know what they're called. Are they priests? And they look like re-deads. They look horrible. I do not want one of them to wake up. They look disgusting.
They do. They look like they're just Bloodborne or something.
They do, don't they? They really creep me out. It's like, yeah, I've done the trial now. They like give you an orb, and it's like, good. I'm going to leave now. It's fine.
Don't judge a book by its cover. They're your nice friends.
They are nice friends. They are definitely nice friends. But yeah.
I mentioned Romancing Saga earlier, and I think all of the Saga games are very creepy in their own way. Some of that is because they're just so rough and sometimes unfinished. I mean, the first Romancing Saga was famously unfinished. It didn't really get its it got a WonderSwan port where they put back in a whole bunch of dummied out content, and then of course there was
WonderSwan.
Yeah. There was the PlayStation 2 remake that tried to restore a bunch of stuff as well, but that first release of Romancing Saga on Super Famicom, it would, they tell you to you could have a side quest to get the 8 Fate Stones, and only 5 of them were actually in the game. But that's not particularly scary. I really liked the Kulong area in Saga Frontier on the PlayStation 1. Which is based on Walled City, Kowloon, and there's a bit in Kulong where you're going through the back streets, which kind of functions as a dungeon in itself, and there's a doctor's office, and you go into the doctor's office, and there's a patient sitting in the waiting room, and the music cuts out, and there's just this ticking of a clock, and you try to talk to this patient, his head falls off, and he's a skeleton in a trench coat. At which point, the chime on this clock rings, and the door opens, and you go in there, and there's this doctor in a white coat who says, okay, well, we're ready to operate. Just lay down on the table, and you just run out. You're like, well, what's the story with that? But if you activate a side quest to get all the to learn all the magic in the game, you go back in there, and he's like, lay down on the table. It's like, actually, do you want to help me find some magic? And he's like, yes, I will. And then he joins the party. Dr. Nusaka, and he's one of the strongest characters that you can get. But it took me a long time to find that he was just bizarrely playable, rather than just a horrifying moment just for the sake of it. I think Saga Frontier was really good at that kind of thing. There's the Biolab as well, where there was meant to be a quest around this, but it wasn't finished, so they just put in this full dungeon with scientists who you'd talk to, and they'd say, oh, you should be like us, it's wonderful here, and then they'll transform into monsters and attack you. But there's no reason for it to be there. I really dig that kind of thing.
Nier Automata, the game as a whole is, I think it's just pretty creepy in general. Even if it doesn't seem that way, I always thought in the back of my mind that this was just a very odd game. Not only because it's just this giant world, has just these randomly has animals and robots just strewn around, but the first real insanely sort of very unnerving moment was when the giant worms started appearing from the sky, the giant robotic worms.
Oh yeah.
And it's It's like really bizarre.
Oh yeah.
Because like you see them from a distance and you're like, surely this is just some backdrop or just like something that will just like go away. But like no, you just go there and they start like flying towards you very slowly. And like
I remember this bit.
yeah, and like it's like I think the worst part is that you can't really do much about them. Like I think the only thing I remember is I just had to jump up and mash all my attack buttons and pray to God that it like damaged their one vulnerable part. And like beyond that, they do a lot of damage and they just like keep on following you. And it was just like a generally sort of very unnerving bit, especially when like 2 or 3 of them spawn at once during one of the quests at some point during the plot, and it's like it becomes a real hassle.
Yeah. I mean, Yoko Taro, anyway, is good at doing unnerving. Jump back in. Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about Drakengard, and I'll go into Nier as well, the first game, because that has got some really creepy moments. But Drakengard has a boss that's just basically lots of babies, doesn't it? Or
it
something
does.
like that.
Yeah, babies with wings and teeth. It's horrible.
Excellent. It's like something else I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I know more about the first Nier in particular. Nier itself is a very uncomfortable experience because of how strange and bizarre it is. I mean, you're going around with a talking book to start off with, but some of my favorite thing about the original Nier, and perhaps something that slightly trumps the newer one, is the enemies, because they're all shades. So the shades are basically, this is a long time ago. These are the remains of the people who have died, as far as I'm aware. So they're like the soul, but actually they're corrupted because they've been poisoned by some disease. But in your first playthrough, you attack them and they make these really strange wispy noises. And after you finish the game, I mean, you can play Nier. It's got 4 different endings, so it's nice to play it 4 times. Every time you complete it, you can hear more of what they say. So when you start killing them, they start like asking for help or saying things to you, and it's really uncomfortable and just generally very bizarre. But the enemy designs in Nier are actually really cool. So I remember some of the giant shades that you have to fight in particular. There's the lizard that walks across the wall. I mean, they just look really haunting because they're just these, I don't want to say husk because they're not, they're the inside of the people or whatever. But so they're like the soul that's just been corrupted and they're completely twisted and bizarre. I mean, Nier is very good at making you feel uncomfortable and making you feel invested in the main characters. And one of the ways it does it is by these shades and by the way that they communicate with you as you play through more. And Emil's quite disturbing in a sense as well. As adorable as he is, I mean, my adorable little skeleton boy, he is a little bit disturbing in his kind of mannerisms, but in a kind of kooky way. But Yoko Taro is very good at making you feel slightly uncomfortable at all times, really.
Yep.
I didn't really know what to expect going into that first Nier when it came out, because they showed a very they presented that game in a particular light, and then you fire that game up for the first time, and you're in that snowfield by that supermarket, and you're just killing more and more of these shades for minutes and minutes and minutes, and even before you get that first ending and you start to unlock what these shades are saying to you, I remember like early on. Like slaughtering my way past like a group of these smaller shades and just like wiping them all out, and there's blood everywhere, and like they drop items, and one of them like dropped like a children's coloring book, and I was like, oh no, this is not this is not going to be good.
I remember that.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think we've missed out a kind of horror RPG that's worth talking about, or a series. I'm not talking about the third game because I've never played it and it's terrible. Parasite Eve, we should talk about, for definite.
We've done an episode on it.
We have done a triple or double episode on it. It was one of our earlier episodes. But Parasite Eve is a really good game. Again, it's another very atmospheric horror game. But I really like the designs of the enemies in it again, and I want to focus on a couple of bosses as well. So one of the first boss that you have to fight after Eve is the alligator in the sewer. So you have to fight all of these mutated rats. So it's quite similar to Dark Souls, I suppose, in the sense that they're really, I mean, there's flesh hanging off them. They've got like gaping wounds and things like that. But the alligator doesn't look like an alligator at all. And it's kind of the first, I remember really struggling with this boss, actually. It was the first time where I had to just go, well, what's going on kind of thing. So it's got no eyes, and that's always a big thing for me. Like, things that don't have eyes make me feel really uncomfortable. And it's just, I don't know, it looks more like a dinosaur with a really, really big tail, and it's got electric protruding out of its teeth, and it's really gross. You have to fight 2 of them in the bonus dungeon in the game at all the same time, but they're not too hard. Just very, very nasty. One that does particularly stick with me, though, other than the final boss, which I want to talk about because babies with teeth and wings, you know, is Kerberos, which is, there's a quest in the game where I think one of the policeman's dogs, one of the policemen's, the daughter goes missing, and she's chasing after the dog, and once you get to the top of the building, the dog has been infected by mitochondria, so he transforms it's a Shiva, it might actually be a girl. But this dog... Yeah,
Shiva's the dog this time.
So, this dog is very beautiful. So if you think... It's kind of very Resident Evil in design, I think, when I look at it. It's got its 3 heads, but instead of having... It's got 3 mouths as well, but it's also got a mouth in between its 3 heads. So think of Cerberus, and then think of, like, a gap in the middle of its, like, neck, and it's got another eye in the middle as well. It's got spikes and just general bones and nastiness protruding out of its skin, dripping blood everywhere, slobbering everywhere. It's really gross, but I really, really like it. And I think, like we've alluded to, it is really sad because, I mean, I like dogs, so anything that happens to them is horrible. Do they die? Does it? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's like old Yeller. You got to empty a clip into that thing.
That's right. You do have to. Good. I didn't know if we recovered afterwards, but that's me blacking out the bad things in life.
Yeah, I think that is the end of that dog. It's quite a sad moment.
It is horrible. It's a good boss though. There's also a Spider Woman as well, which I can say you've seen Spider Womans in RPGs, but Ultimate Being, or UB, is pretty spectacular. It's not necessarily creepy, but the final boss, this is another, I think for me, what makes things creepy is music, and a lot of the ones that I've picked out have had music, and UB, which is the final boss track, is particularly chilling because it's got this constant really low choir throughout it, and it just picks up and up and up, and every time the boss has got 4 forms, so it starts off as a little baby, and then I think it gets wings, and then it turns into an adolescent, and then it turns into, I mean, I want to say a fish, but it also looks like Terra Tower from Chrono Cross now that I look at it. So it's it does a little bit. But yeah, UB is fun. I mean, the whole of that end sequence in the game anyway is really creepy because it's the aim of Eve is that she wants to give birth to the ultimate being. So she goes to a sperm bank, gets some sperm, impregnates herself, sits on an island, and you try and kill her, but it's too late because the baby comes out of the ocean, and this is a really redux version of it. And yeah, and it's got an umbilical cord sticking out as well, so lovely. Just to add little things. So it evolves from baby to child, which the child's got like a head sticking out of the back of it like a snake, and then adolescent, which looks like a Resident Evil boss again, and then UB, which looks like Terra Tower with a fish, so and a stingray. But yeah, the boss is really good because with every form, the music changes. So at the start, you've just got the really low choir, and then you get, I can't remember when the percussion comes in. I think it must be the 2nd stage, and the 3rd stage just picks up a bit, and then you get some really funky synth effects in the last bit. But I really like the way that boss builds up. But one thing the bit that creeps me out about the boss is the bit after the boss, which is also probably the worst and most frustrating part of the game, where you have to run through the ship to blow it up to kill the boss. So after you've fought it for 10, 15 minutes, it chases you, but it's always right behind you. So if you take a wrong turn, you're dead, and you have to do all 4 phases again. Wow. So It's nasty.
That's
I
bad
do
design.
like the. It's
That sounds
bad
like
design.
Sounds like a chore.
It is a chore. It's not too hard though. There's only like 2 or 3 wrong turns you can take, but it is a bit of a nightmare, especially where it's such a long boss, and you can't like, even if you're like overpowered and have all of Aya's best moves, you can't just like one shot it. You have to like whittle it down over time. But I both love and hate the end sequence because it's really unsettling because you think you've beaten it, and then all of a sudden it's crawling after you, and you then have to calmly get through this ship. And probably the reason I remember it so I remember it fondly, but also remember it negatively, is because I failed that first time, and it just made me realise how kind of important and how creepy that bit was. It's bad design, but definitely maybe to its benefit, because that's why I remember it being so like, oh, it's an alien or whatever it is. But yeah. Good. It's a creepy game. I love them. I've not played the second one, and I intend to, but my quick glance.
Watch out.
Watch out.
Yeah, I'm really not a fan of that second game.
Yeah, I've heard mixed opinions on it. I've seen the designs of the enemies, and some of them are really creepy, but a lot of them are very gelatinous and blobby again. So it's like, it's not anything I haven't seen before. The final boss is really disappointing as well, considering that UB's kind of importance and the build up to him. But yeah, don't play 3.
Yeah, I haven't played 3, but I've heard. Yeah, I've heard things.
I haven't played it either, but yeah.
Have you played Parasite Eve, Tom?
I have not. I have, didn't own a PS2 or any of the classic consoles.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started on the PS3, so.
Whoa.
Oh well, if you've got a PS3, it's on the US PSN for a
is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not much at all. It's definitely worth it. It does take a bit of getting used to, but once you've got used to it, it's quite easy to plow through. You don't ever have to be over leveled in particular. So yeah, it's another series that's died out. I don't like. It's sad that all of these kind of slightly creepy horror RPGs have died out because they're quite a niche, I suppose, but.
Parasite Eve was a tie-in to a movie which was based on a book, and the whole reason they called that the third birthday was because they didn't have the license anymore, and I guess they chose to take that in a direction that nobody really was interested in. So I guess that's the last that we will see of Aya and those characters.
Possibly for the best after that.
But I distinctly remember like a giant centipede boss that splits into 4 and
yeah,
like, runs all around you, spitting poison. This is horrible.
Yeah, I do remember that one. That's good. Yeah, definitely worth playing, and check out our episodes on that game because they were really cool. And it's a very short. It's only like 10 hours, so it's not that hard to get through at all.
Yeah, indeed. I guess any Halloween episode would be remiss if I didn't mention Shin Megami Tensei, but I'm not going to talk about it too much because we'll be here all day. But over the course of our conversation today, I remembered the reverse hills from Shin Megami Tensei 4. Where,
I've heard about these.
Yeah, the Roppongi area. It's governed by this yakuza group called the Ashura Kai. And they're putting out these propaganda videos saying, like, oh, come under our protection and obey our rules. And look, there's happy children here in a daycare, and everything's good because we're in charge. And you break into the Reverse Hills, which is like it's underground skyscrapers underneath Roppongi Hills. And you get in there, and it's this. It's like this evil science lab, which, like, thinking about it now, it's probably actually a bit distasteful. But they're using these people as what they call seed beds, where they've got them hooked up to these machines, and they're like harvesting their brain matter to basically like giving them lobotomies to make little treats to bribe the demons with to keep them away. But then there's like ladies strapped to tables who are being forcefully impregnated to like produce more and more kids, and then like the kids get used as get their brains scooped out. And in retrospect, actually saying that out loud, that's more bad taste than it is anything else. But I remember that whole segment just being horrifying, and like going through this area, and when you're not fighting demons, you're going into the rooms and seeing what kind of atrocities are just being carried out in the name of the quote unquote greater good, which is not, and you end up taking it all down, and rightfully so. Yeah, that moment stuck with me. That's a very disquieting game all the way through. I like the optional areas later on it's got this really creepy music, and you've got like a 1 in 256 chance to run into one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And I like that kind of hidden boss fight, but they could have stood to make the odds on that a little bit better, because I didn't have the patience to keep going in and out and try and make that happen. But I think the idea is in the right place. It's just the execution that it falls down on. Anything else from you guys before we close out this frightening session?
I guess I want to talk very briefly before we close off about another RPG that the podcast has covered.
Okay, we're in no hurry, so please take your time.
So I'll touch on Earthbound a little bit, because that game is it's in the same vein as I'm not going to talk about the final boss, because that's been kind of bled dry a little bit. But so that game is another game that's really unsettling for the bizarre humor, and I love Earthbound so much, but there are a couple of moments that really kind of creep me out, I suppose. So the one thing that I always remember is the first time that I get to Foreside and the first time that I flip over to the other side, and I just remember how weirded out I was and how bizarre everything seemed to be. Earthbound is a very unusual RPG anyway in terms of its execution and its story and everything, which is why I adore it so much. But Foreside was the very moment where I kind of had to just stop and pause a little bit and realise. So basically it goes from normal city to it's neon and black and white and
Moonside. Everybody's
weird. You drink milk, don't you? Yeah. Is that, yeah. You drink milk or something to get there, or some weird concoction, and then they're like, oh, you're there now, and I can't remember in detail. And it's just like, it's just how normally. The thing is Earthbound deals with everything so nonchalantly and normally that it just, you're supposed to accept everything that happens throughout it, but you just can't. It's so odd. I think replaying it would be doing me a lot of favours, because I do already adore everything that it did, but Foresight is like the one bit where I sort of went, oh my god. But the original Earthbound, or Earthbound Zero, or Mother, or whatever.
Oh, you reviewed it, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
I bet that was an undertaking.
I appreciate its existence, but yeah, it's not aged well at all. People say that the Earthbound hasn't aged well, but actually it has. So compared to Mother, definitely, yeah, that is a difficult game. It's not difficult until you get to like the very last few hours, and then when you get to the last city, and then go up Mount Itoy, which famously they didn't have enough time to test. And so everything kills you in one hit, and it's like, oh, okay. Final boss is okay, though. But yeah, I suppose if we are going to talk about final bosses, then I think Geeg from the original Mother is probably creepier than Gygus from Earthbound Mother 2, because
really?
A little bit. I think it's because there's no music in that boss at all. Like, it's literally just a couple of chip beats of, I don't know, it's just, I think the only thing you can hear is the kind of noise that he makes when he uses his special attack. But it might just be my kind of uncomfortableness with fetal figures and things like that, because he is essentially just like not a fetus, but he's like a pre-life form kind of squiggle with a head on it. And there's no music in that section, and he just comes down on his spaceship, and even though that Gygus in Earthbound is very creepy with the kind of speech that he uses, Geeg, that he's kind of trying to tempt you over, and he's just, it uses the same mechanics as the more recent or the more popular game has, in that you have to pray and you basically have to hear him out, basically. but yeah, I think it's because I watched a video of it before it had been localized officially when I was researching Earthbound and Mother and things like that. And I just remember watching it and just freaking out, really, because I don't know, it was just weird. But yeah, Gygus in itself is creepy, but everyone goes on about it so much that I'm almost immune to it, I suppose. But then I guess the Cave of the Past is a quite horrifying experience in itself because of the way it looks and the way it's designed. So you have to go thousands of years back into the past, and your souls are embedded into robots. This is in Earthbound. And the inside, for lack of better words, looks like either intestines or fallopian tubes, if you want to go down the whole route that everybody thinks the final boss is. Yeah, I'm not 100% there, no, but I was for a while, but I think I don't. After what Itoya said, I don't think I believe it. But yeah, it depends. I think
he'd probably be a little bit classier than that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it didn't. All right, then it looks like intestines for definite. It just looks like the inside of something. It's a really nasty place.
I mean, any of those sort of biological dungeons, they are all going to look inherently womb-like, and I think there is something to be said for that. But I think that the rest of the theories surrounding that, I don't really subscribe to. But yeah, it is definitely womb-like in there.
I think so. Yeah, Earthbound's an unusual series that is worth playing.
Yeah, definitely. There's a bit in Mother 3 where you end up stranded on an island, and you're running out of food, and you end up eating a bunch of magic mushrooms, and there's a drug trip sequence, and it's mostly goofy, but there's a few bits, just a few bits of dialogue that or bits of text rather, that creep me out. There's a mailbox. And you open it up, and it's like you opened up the mailbox, and there was nothing inside. More and more nothing came flowing out of the mailbox. It's covering you. And then there was a signpost. It said something like everybody's they're all hitting you and spitting on you and cursing at you and telling you that you should be dead. And who is this? It's everybody that you love.
Wow.
Yeah, those games are really, really good at making you feel uncomfortable. I love it.
Moments ahoy in the Mother series. Dom, anything you'd like to add before we finish today?
This just came to mind, but Mass Effect 2 and 3 were actually pretty freaking creepy. Now that I think about it.
I didn't play 3, but I did like 2.
With 2, it was mainly collectors, I guess, just because the mystery surrounding them and the fact that they just look like big humanoid bugs, and they have wings and stuff, and while they're big head and they have enormous heads and whatnot, and while that was it made them pretty easy in terms of gameplay, because you could just pop their heads from a mile away. Just from a design standpoint, that was really unnerving to watch. And at the end, all the way at the end, when Harbinger starts possessing them, that's also not very, I should say.
Assuming
it's pretty unsettling, because he possesses one, and then you kill him, and then he disintegrates, and then he starts possessing another one, and you're like, oh my god, please stop. And then the game closes out with the Human Reaper, which is, it's just an enormous humanoid. It's the biggest zombie you will ever see, because it's literally made from 1 million humans that were ground into goop, and then they were just put on an exoskeleton.
Yeah, so cool. I remember. Yeah, I remember that bit. Isn't there a chance that one of your crew can be the person in the pod? Because don't you find somebody in a pod who just gets disintegrated into gloop? It's really horrible, isn't it?
Yeah. If you once that mission triggers, if you don't immediately do it, then your crew gets turned into human goop, which is not very pleasant. And then 3 takes it even further, because that's when the Reapers start invading, and then all the life forms start getting turned into Reaper mishmashes, and it's Ravagers have these they just have big sacks, and they pop, and then creepy crawlies come at you from that, and it's looking back on it, it's very sort of unnerving design, especially with the Banshees as well, because Yeah, if there's one thing that's scarier than just like some gross looking like bug monster, it's enemies that scream and then teleport at you. Because like, and then like when you have 2 or 3 banshees on you, it's like you know. I think the first time I played through, I just like dropped my controller, just like press pause, drop my controller. I need to get a glass of water before I play through this.
There's something to be said, isn't there, when there are, because Rob has brought up Phantasy Star and you've brought up Mass Effect, and I suppose in a way Earthbound as well. It's something about space and something about the unknown that really creeps a lot of people out. And yeah, it's very. I kind of wish there were more. I mean, I'd like to say I wish there were more RPGs set in space, but Star Ocean has proved that no. So don't worry.
Well, I don't even know if Star Ocean really counts.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, in the most liberal terms.
It pretends to be set in space, but
it does.
It almost never is.
Nope. I think it's got something to say when you've got, like... Because you don't know what they're going to be. They could be anything, whereas at least with Shadow Hearts, you can kind of... Or even Dark Souls, you can draw from the lore and just see, like, oh, yeah, look, it's a person, or it's a dog, or it's something else, whereas... Aliens are like, you don't know what they're going to look like, and there are some really even like outside of RPGs, there are some really disgusting examples of space creatures.
Dead Space, notably.
Dead Space and Half-Life.
Yeah.
Well, that has been our Halloween Spooktacular. And next week, Josh Curry is rejoining Retro Encounter to host the annual BlizzCon episode with Mike Solosi. Following that, throughout November, we're going to have an entire month of Final Fantasy-themed podcasts in honor of the 30th anniversary of varying topics related to this many storied and long-running series that we all know and love. There will also be a whole bunch of written material about the series going live on the site around that time. So we hope that you stay tuned for that. If you want to get in touch with us, you can always email the podcast at retro@rpgfan.com. I know a lot of you are emailing asking Mike to play Kingdom Hearts. I wholeheartedly encourage this behavior. Please keep doing this. In last week's episode on Digital Devil Saga, he also mentioned people emailing in to get him to play Nocturne. I also really highly recommend that you do this. Please give Mike a hard time, and I will be there right alongside him, having a bad time. And it sounds like Alana might as well. So
yeah. Oh God, we didn't even talk about that in this episode. That game is pretty horrifying. But yeah, I really want to try it again now that I'm older. This is kind of off topic. I remember getting it. I was borrowing it off of my brother's friend. And he only gave it to me because Europe only got the version with Dante from Devil May Cry in it. So that's where that all started. That's where that meme's from. But yeah, I played about maybe 2 hours of it and got throttled. So now that I'm older, let's give it another go. So yeah, why don't you email us and tell us to play it and I'll suffer.
Yeah, we will all suffer and it will be so good. If you would be so kind as to leave us a review on iTunes or Google Play or any of the podcast networks where you can find us, that would be a really big help. I know also many of you have done that as well, and we're very, very grateful. But any positive reviews helps increase our visibility and helps us get new fans in. So if you could take a couple of minutes, that would be fantastic. But Alana, where can people find you if they want to interact with you?
Oh, so on the boards and elsewhere, I'm Diving Falcons, or on Twitter, I am at Alana Hagues. So let's get in touch and talk.
Dom, how about you?
Sure. I am on the forums and on Discord most recently. I am DH Canning, so you can leave me a message.
I'm on the forums as Townscar Marty. I'm also on the Discord. Let me see if I can find that URL for you. In fact, you know what? It's on our forums. There's a link to the Discord. I think you need an invite, but everybody's invited, whether you're on the forums or not. So come and hang out there. We've actually got a really cool community. Everybody is very friendly and open-minded. So do come and chat with us. A lot of us staff members are hanging out there too. So if you want to chat, that's the place to do it. I'm also on Twitter at Misanthrobob, so hit me up. That's where we'll close out this episode, folks, and stay tuned next week for the BlizzCon episode. I'd like to thank my co-host for joining me, and we'll see you again very soon.